Young Justice returned this week to our app screens with a brand new episode entitled Ego and Super Ego. I'm Cape Joel, and this is the video series where I give my thoughts and feelings on the episode that was, as well as shouting out any Easter eggs or references I can find. So, with that out of the way, let's get to it, shall we? So then, I think I can say I was surprised as anyone to see the second episode of this brand new arc actually circle back to dealing with the fallout from Geoforce and the end of Season 3. Honestly, this late in the show, I assumed we weren't getting a full episode dealing with Brion, maybe until next season. But yet, here we are, and as we join the episode, Lizard Boy Johnny, one of the liberated meta-kids, attempts to make his way to Asylum in Markovia only to come under attack by an anti-metahuman lynch mob. Johnny is once again saved by the intervention of King Brion and his brand new super team, the Infinitors, and if that name and those faces look familiar to you, that means you've been paying attention because, hey, Fury and Everyman we have technically seen once before last season as part of Lex Luthor's corporately backed super team Infinity Inc. Meaning the Light not only assisted in turning Geoforce to the dark side, but now they're using him and his country to try and completely rehab the image of their failed Outsiders competition. It's also made abundantly clear early on that while Brion thinks he's out there fighting the good fight, these superhero missions are being manipulated by the Light, and in particular the Markovian ambassador, who still technically doesn't have a proper name yet, but who can still influence people's minds. Now, at the other end of the episode, we have the continuing saga of Conor and Phantom Girl. She finally came to at the end of the last episode, and now she's ready to give a proper technobabble explanation as to why her and Superboy got sent to the Phantom Zone in the first place, and how they can both properly escape. There's just one massive problem though, and that is zone-sick Conor has been drinking the House of Zod Kool-Aid for way too long now, and he doesn't want to leave. As a comic reader, I thought this whole thing ended up being a very clever inverse of Lore Zod's story from the comics, where he was taken in by the Kents and taught to be a better person and a hero. Here it's Conor being taken in by the Zods and slowly losing himself. Oh, but wait, that's not all. This was a jam-packed episode complete with C and D plots. We check back with Violet, who just so happens to be moving on with their lives and into a college dorm, no less. Sadly, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as Violet has a lot of unresolved issues with Brion, their love interest from Season 3, and if Violet can't overcome these complex human emotions, how are they ever supposed to truly move on? Also, hey, major points for Harper Row sticking to her classic blue-collar comic roots by going into the trades instead of going to college. She was an electrician in the books, and she used that know-how to make her first super suit. I wonder how long until that actually happens in the show proper. Then, of course, we still have the ongoing storyline of Nightwing and the others trying to enter the Phantom Zone themselves. They think by getting their hands on that dimension-hopping bus, they'll be able to do just that. Unfortunately, the bus has already been crushed into a cube. Luckily, though, when you have magic powers on your side, no problem can't be solved without the proper application of gremlins, and man, you just know it's a Greg Wiseman show because we get treated to funny little monsters getting into all sorts of shenanigans and getting bribed with human snacks. Back in the more serious part of the episode, though, we see the Markovian government is continuing its push to make more metahuman citizens. It's a plan that extends not only to metas from the surrounding nations, but also meta-teens from the Justice League's own outreach center in Taos. King Brion thinks this might be a bad idea, stepping on the toes of his old friends and teammates, but once again, the ambassador is able to make him act in accordance to the Light's wishes, something that even Fury begins to clock as a worrying development. For the record, there have actually been a number of characters called Fury from across DC Comics history. We learn that her name is Rosa, which probably implies that she's just a new version in this long line of characters. And hey, speaking of Taos and we get to check in on some of those very meta-teens, in particular Beast Boy, who thanks to therapy sessions, medications, and an adorable personal support corgi, he's finally managed to start turning things around. His dog also just so happens to be named Wingman, which is a super deep cut reference to Crimson Avenger, technically DC Comics' very first published hero. Even the comics don't mention Crimson Avenger anymore, and if you know Wingman at all, you probably know that as the identity that Jason Todd took when he was a part of Batman Inc. It's also just nice to see Garth thriving again, and maybe this means people will finally hush up who say silly things like, Young Justice is just all about suffering now. Geez, it's like the essence of drama has always been conflict, and that suffering and adversity aren't necessarily the same things, and that, you gotta give characters roadblocks to overcome so they can grow and evolve. Now, it's later in this episode we learn the true dark secret behind Markovia's meta plans. They aren't just welcoming them into the country, they're also actively creating more. We learn this via a cute little informational video that once again apes the art style of Teen Titans Go. What this essentially means is that the Light, after all this time, have finally managed to solve their problem for creating brand new metahuman weapons. No more having to do it in secret, no more having to kidnap people, because now they've managed to work out a system where people actively volunteer to be guinea pigs. And if anyone even so much as dares to have a problem with it, they also can send in the Infinitors to threaten them and their families. Nice touch too, with every man taking on his classic monster form from the books too. I appreciated that. Granted, not everyone sees this as a net plus. King Brion himself is deeply troubled and conflicted. He has been ever since he killed his uncle at the end of season 3. Oh sure, the ambassador gave him the final push, but let's face it, Brion, with his rage and indignation, happily walked up to the edge himself. And in the end, he wasn't even really punished for it. Quite the opposite. He went against the superhero's core teachings and ended up getting everything he wanted anyway. The throne, revenge on the man who hurt his family. It probably explains why he never bothered to try and reach out and reconnect with the outsiders once it was all said and done. And also why he's pushing so hard to try and make things better for metahumans now. He's trying to cleanse himself of all his shame. Honestly, I think Brion kind of ends up being one of the deepest, most complex and nuanced characters in the entire show, a far cry from his comic counterpart who was always just a little bit lame. It's in one of these moments of self-doubt and self-reflection that Halo ends up coming to Brion and rocking a new costume much closer to the original Halo suit from the books. What follows is a truly heartbreaking exchange between two former lovers. Despite what they may have shared, it's made abundantly clear that there's no going back. Violet has changed and evolved, while Brion, either by his own choices or by the meddling that was done by the Light, is still very much trapped in his old ways. Also, hey, how about the scene wherein the evil ambassador misgenders Violet only for them to totally smack the guy down? I'm sure that scene will be living rent-free in a lot of people's heads for a while. While it's certainly tough letting go, the end of one relationship leaves the door open for another, as Violet thinks maybe now is a good time to get closer to Harper, finally with a free mind and open heart. And as the episode finally comes to a close, Nightwing and the other OG Young Justice members finally board the bus. Next stop, Phantom Zone and Superboy. And so that was Ego and Super Ego, another episode that really ended up taking me by surprise, but one that left me feeling really satisfied to see how much growth the outsider cast from season 3 ended up getting. I also think it was a stroke of genius from the writers to juxtapose a story about Brion slowly losing himself in Markovia with a story about Conor losing himself in the Phantom Zone. After all, Brion was more or less set up to be the Superboy of his hero generation, and Conor was the one to give him the best advice when it came to the topic of dealing with his anger. So to see them in more or less the same position is honestly kind of fascinating. Also, after getting totally pantsed at the end of the Atlantis arc, this episode reestablishes the Light and their machinations as an actual real threat again, just when it looked like they were going to get eclipsed by General Zod. Overall, another real solid one that makes me wonder how exactly all these different pieces are going to fall into place when it's all over. But that'll just about do it for me, everyone. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, and favorite so you always know when a new Young Justice video is about to drop. I'm very close to 40k, and I would just love to be able to hit that milestone by the end of the year. So, until next week, everyone, I've been Cape Joel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.